found out yesterday not everyone is in love with this president's policies on the Democratic side. During a televised one-hour town hall yesterday, the president faced tough questions from his supporters. Watch.
Quite frankly, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of defending you, defending your administration, defending the mantle of change that I voted for, and deeply disappointed with where we are right now. I've been told that I voted for a man who said he was going to change things in a meaningful way for the middle class. I'm one of those people, and I'm waiting, sir. I'm waiting. I don't feel it yet.
Okay. The initial reaction to this clip for me was, well, it's about time. But this is an interesting moment that goes deeper than the president. This woman is very sincere, and she wasn't the only one that stood up. She wants to believe, but she can't help but ask, is this it? Is this the best you can do? Unfortunately, if she believes in what we showed earlier, the first choice of the free market system, yes, this is going to be as good as it gets. But if you believe in the redistribution of wealth and global government run by elites, if you're in America, the answer is yes, this is about as good as it's going to get. Remember, this is the beginning. This is the fun part. This is when all the cash that he's dumped into the system is still flowing through our economic bloodstream. What happens when all the cash goes away? Or if we have yet another stimulus package and all we're left with is the debt? The president tries to make himself appear as a pragmatist, but he's not. He is an ideologue, a pragmatic ideologue, but an ideologue nonetheless. He's going to have to endure his own supporters abandoning him. And if that's the case, then he has to make sure that his time isn't wasted. The redistribution of wealth is just starting. The American standard of life is changing, and it is fueled by global unions closely tied to this administration and this idea that America is unfair to the rest of the world. And to raise up the rest of the world, we have no choice but to face hardship ourselves. They haven't told you this yet, but all of their actions and all of the words around it tell you this. Now, you're going to have hardship unless you're in the union leadership, and then you're having drinks with the most powerful people in the world twice a week. You're protected. But if you're a union member, you're a pawn to these people. I get calls occasionally on my radio show from union members who are mad at me, and they say, stop bashing the unions. Why are you targeting me or acting like I'm lazy or I'm hurting the economy? And I apologize if I have come off that way. I tell them the same thing every time. This is not about union members. The vast majority of union members want the best for themselves. They want a fair pay. They also want what's best for their families, their coworkers, but they also want what's right for the country. The union leadership, however, is another story. For example, Andy Stern, the most frequent visitor of the early Obama White House, former head of SEIU, and member of the President's National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform. This is a guy who's constantly talking about the global worker. Not talking about you, the union member, the global worker. Workers of the world, as he says.
Workers of the world unite. It's not just a slogan anymore. It's a way we're going to have to do our work.
We took names. We watched how they voted. We know where they live.
We're trying to use the power of persuasion. And if that doesn't work, we're going to use the persuasion of power.
We created global trade. We created global finance. We created global companies. But we forgot to create a global government.
There are opportunities in America to share better in the wealth, to rebalance the power, and unions and government are part of the solution.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought unions were supposed to be about the American worker. When did that stop? Let me ask you this question if you're in a union. Is this what you stand for? Workers of the world unite. Is that it? How about, are you for the redistribution of wealth globally? Are you for a global governance or government? Now, maybe you don't care about what these ideologues are doing at this level. You just care about what's happening in your factory. And that's fine. I understand that. But I want you to think about this. What is your union supposed to do in theory? What it's supposed to do is it negotiates as a group so that the workers are protected, right? then the strongest employees and the weakest employees get the same guaranteed raises and benefits. That's the way it's supposed to work in theory. It smooths out a whole group of people, trading the huge upsides and downsides of job security. Got it? Now, you might like that protection. You might even, like the fact that some of your weaker coworkers get a bit more security. Maybe. I don't believe in that, but maybe you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what happens when your coworkers aren't who you think they are? What happens if your coworkers are not in your factory? In fact, they're not even in your country. What happens when your union boss is trying to smooth out the difference between someone like you making, let's say, $65,000 a year in the US and someone in China, which they are now merging with in China, $65,000 here and someone in China making $1.50 a day? How do you smooth that one out? How does that work for you? More on that next. How does someone supposedly fighting for your rights as an American worker go all around the world and say, workers of the world unite? How are you helped when the union is telling you that they are fighting outsourcing, but they're meeting with the Chinese at the same time? This is what was happening with Andy Stern. Let me ask you something. As an average union worker, if you happen to be, not somebody in the power structure, but somebody who's working every day just trying to feed their family and keep your head above water, is that what you stand for? Is it? Are people like Andy Stern or Trumpka really standing up for your values? Workers of the world unite. Are you looking to smooth out the wage differences between the U.S. and China or Mexico? Because I got news for you. If you smooth that curve out, it doesn't end well on your side. Now, I want you to know, I'm not in a union. I don't run a union shop. I have nothing to lose or gain from unions personally, maybe my life. I don't like the effect on the economy. I don't like the incentives that they create. I don't understand why businesses should be paying the idiot who works down the hall the same as you when you're doing your job and they're not. I don't get that. I'd rather pay you more money and fire him. I don't know why companies shouldn't be able to, fire people, be more efficient. If they're a bad worker, fire them. It doesn't make sense. I think it lowers morale. I'd rather work with a bunch of people who are good at their job, wouldn't you? But this is not a debate on whether unions are a good idea or not. We'll talk about that, I guess, later. I'm sorry I got sidetracked. I want to talk to you about the values of the union bosses. And please explain to yourself and to me how they match with yours. Back in a minute. That is going to be an unbelievable photo book. Check it out at glennbeck.com/ I think it said 828 or /books. Today we started the program and we told you these are two choices. This is the regular Democrat and Republican independent Tea Party movement. And this is what's happening in Washington, redistribution of wealth and a global governance. And we're talking about the values of union bosses here because I don't think they match up with your values. And I'm talking to union members. We can have the debate after unions, about unions, once again, if they become about the rights and responsibilities of the American worker, when it's not about a global idea of moving wealth around from your pocket into the pocket of workers in third world nations who are already undercutting you in price, wages, and working conditions. This isn't whether or not you should be in a union or not. It's about pointing out that unions have changed. They're not run with people, by people who have the same values. Workers of the world unite. I mean, the unions used to protect the American worker, and pretty much they were protectionists for a long time. But now they've swung all the way over to a global union. How did that happen? When did that happen? The truth is union workers are in most cases great people who work their butt off. But increasingly, the leadership is focused on ideas that I think the membership would be shocked to hear. And it's important that you are aware of where your union stands. If they sound like Andy Stern or, Trumpka at AFL-CIO, you either agree with that or you don't. But don't stand there. Support them or take control away from them or leave. Union bosses are like any other group of people. When the cats are away, the mice will play, and the membership are the cats. Remember, they work for you. Demand they represent your values. Or maybe you need a union to represent you against the union. Leave them by the curb. Back in a minute.
Mr. President, if restoring honor to America, defending our Constitution, and turning to God has become a radical idea, well, I guess we're in more trouble than we thought. On November 2nd, vote Democrat, Republican, or Independent, but most importantly, vote for America.
America, we have to get out and vote. We can do better than the way we've been voting. And I also ask you, take our 40-day and 40-night challenge. You can find it on the website at foxnews.com or at glennbeck.com. We have it within our grasp to change the direction of our country. From New York, good night, America.